David Toovey is a digital and social media expert here in Rwanda who has worked in the media scene for the past 3 years. Welcome, David. So I wanted to talk to you about the fact that, digital media, seems to just be blowing up. A lot of things are happening in that world right now. What do you think is the future of print media? Is it just going to die out?
I think it's really interesting. We've seen a huge decline in print media all around the world, especially in developed countries. Places like the US, Australia, the UK, and across Europe, people aren't buying newspapers anymore. But here in Africa, and even in East Africa, people are still buying papers. So I think that's really interesting. But the move to digital is increasingly happening, and I think our newspapers need to be prepared for that.
Now, the thing we can all say is that having the move from from print media to digital media is great for personal expression. You have blogs, everybody kinds of become a journalist, all you need is a computer, basically. But what I think is getting lost in between is the fact that being able to publish in a newspaper, you actually have to be a journalist and a great one at that. Ink stays. You can replace it. You can alter things. Exactly. What do you think is going to be the biggest change with the whole move from print media to digital media?
Sure. I think it's the way people engage with the information. Before there was very little choice in where you got your information from and how you got it. You would wake up in the morning, buy your local paper along with, pardon me, milk, and you would just read that, and that would be your information for the day. But today we have access to so much more information. We can get it on Twitter. The first thing I do when I wake up is go on Twitter and see what's being tweeted by you guys, and my friends and newspapers. So I think that's what's going to be the big change: how people access the information and use it and share with their friends.
Now, one can argue that actually digital media helps you become creative, but some push the creativity a bit too far. Now, the whole copyright thing, how does it apply for digital media? We know how it applies for books and newspapers.
Yeah.
How does it apply for digital media?
It applies in a very similar way. Sites like the Huffington Post have made their brand on using other people's content well. There's a great example of a New York Times story that the New York Times broke, but that got more views on Huffington Post because of the way they packaged it. Now, that's not a copyright issue, that's just Huffington Post being creative. But for people who are photographers or journalists, having their work reproduced or stolen in a way is not okay. So we need to make sure that newspapers who are online, digital, even bloggers, credit where they get their stuff from. Creative work needs to be shared, absolutely, but we need to tell people where it's come from.
Have some ownership over that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to know, what is the real, it feels like everyone here is on Twitter and on Facebook, but really, how many people in Rwanda are actually using social media? Sure.
It is a large number, but still radio is the #1 form of communication in Rwanda. And I think that's something that media houses still really need to take into account. But as the 4G network comes, as the cost of data becomes less expensive, I think more people are going to be able to access these platforms. What I think is really interesting is how WhatsApp will change the way people communicate and the way they receive their news. A lot of
Hasn't that happened yet? I believe it's happened.
Sure, it's happened already, but I think in places where people they only have feature phones or they don't have smartphones, yet WhatsApp is such a popular platform that as soon as they get it and they share with their friends and they realize that it's much cheaper than an SMS, I think you'll see a really huge amount of information being transferred there, and maybe then later it'll be Twitter and Facebook and other things like that.
Right, so just very quickly before we have to wrap up, I see a lot of people, like what you were saying, getting on social media, getting their smartphones, and even people with these small, simple phones, they're able to access Facebook now.
Yep, exactly.
So tell me, what do you think is the future of social media in Rwanda?
Sure, I think it's a really bright future. Rwandans and people all over the world are incredibly social. Particularly Rwandans, it's a very it's an amazing culture where people love to share stories, and that's what I love hearing from my friends in Rwanda. And social media gives us a great opportunity to share those stories.
Absolutely.
So I would just encourage all Rwandans to get on social media,
there.
join the buzz.
Believe me, he's the social media guy, so when he says it, it goes. Thank you very much.